Today we are working on decimal division. Please copy down the standard benchmark indicator on a clean page in your math notebook. The student will find the quotient given a decimal dividend and a decimal divisor. When you divide by a decimal, you need to rewrite the dividend and the divisor so you're dividing by a whole number. So how this works, we have 2 and 48/100 divided by 8/10. So step 1 is to estimate and use compatible numbers. So if we know that 240 divided by 80 equals 3, we know our answer is going to be about in that range. So the way to make the divisor a whole number is to multiply the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. What this means, when you're actually doing it, is when you move the decimal in the divisor, the 8/10 we have, if you look, they move the decimal from in front of the 8 to behind the 8. So we need to move the decimal one place in the dividend, the 2 and 48/100. So however many places you move it in the divisor, you move it the same in the dividend. So now we have 8 dividing into 24 and 8/10. Now you can still have a decimal inside the house. We just have to have a whole number outside of it. The divisor has to be a whole number. So we're going to divide as we would with whole numbers now. So 8 goes into 24 3 times. We put the 3 above the 4, and we subtract 24, and we get 0. Then we bring down the 8. Each is going to go into 8 once, so we put the 1 above the 8. And we subtract 8 from 8, we get 0. So we don't have a remainder. Decimal division does not have a remainder. Sometimes we might need to add or annex zeros onto the end of the dividend to be able to finish out the number, but we're always going to get a complete number, a decimal, nothing with a remainder. So in this case, the answer is 3 and 1/10. And if we compare that with the estimate up above, it's about 3, so we know the answer checks out. All right, continuing with our try it. First thing we're going to look at is our estimate. And so we're going to look at this as kind of whole numbers here. So if we think about 15 divided by 2, we know it's going to go in about 7 times because 2 will go into 14 7 times. Now we have to decide what power of 10 we're multiplying the dividend and the divisor. Because we need to move the decimal one place to get it behind the 2, we're going to multiply by 10, both numbers. Now we're going to move the decimal point. So we're going to move it behind the 2 and behind the 5. So now we've placed the decimal point in the dividend. Then we're going to divide. We know 2 goes into 15 7 times. Now, right now we have a remainder. So because we have that decimal point behind the 15, we can add a 0 after the decimal point. So we need to annex or add 1 0. Now, as we bring that 0 down, we can divide 2 into 10. We know it goes 5 times. Now, the next thing we need to remind ourselves to do is to put the decimal in the quotient. It goes straight up from where it is after the 5 and the 15, so it's going to end up between the 7 and the 5. Then we're going to compare the quotient to our estimate, and our actual answer is 7 and 5/10. Our estimate was 7, so yes, our answer is reasonable. For number 2, again, we need to move the decimal place one time for each number because we need to get a whole number outside the little division house. So it's going to become 6 going into 3 and 6/10. Okay, we know 6 can't divide into 3, so we're going to put a 0 and then put our decimal point in. Then we can divide 6 into 36, which we know goes 6 times evenly. So our answer is 0 and 6/10. All right, for number 3, we have 4/10 dividing into 9 and 6/10. So the first thing we need to do is multiply by 10, which allows us to move the decimal one place. So we're going to move it behind the 4 and behind the 6. Now we just divide like we do with whole numbers. So 4 goes into 9 twice. Okay, and then we bring down the 6, so we get 16, and 4 goes into 16 4 times evenly. Which makes our answer 24 exactly. Right, for problem 4, we have 75 hundredths dividing into 3/10. So we're going to multiply both numbers by 100, which allows us to move the decimal place 2 places to the right to get a whole number as our divisor. Now you'll notice there's nothing behind the 3, so we're going to have to add a 0 when we move the decimal place for our place holding. So now we have 75 dividing into 30, which we also know is not going to work. So we're going to add a decimal point behind the 30 and another 0. Now we just have to figure out how many times 75 goes into 300. Well, we know 75 times 2 is 150, so let's try 75 times 4 to see if that works to get us close to 300. And it gets us 300 exactly. So we're going to put the 4 above the second 0 and subtract 300. Now we know we need to put the decimal in our quotients. We're going to bring the decimal up directly from where it is, so it's going to end up right in front of the 4. So our answer is 0 and 4/10. For 5, draw a picture. Fernando used 10th grids to draw this picture showing 1 and 6/10 divided by 4/10 equals 4. And you can see he drew out 2 boxes, divided them into tenths, and shaded them in groups of 4/10. And we can see there are 4 groups of 4/10 there. So we're going to draw a picture to show 1 and 8/10 divided by 6/10. So the first thing we need to do is draw 2 rectangles and divide them into tenths. And if your box ends up a little too big, it's okay. Just erase the pieces you don't need. So now we're going to shade in 1 and 8/10. So we're going to shade in one whole and then 8/10 of the next one. I'd recommend using a different color for this so you can see the difference between your shading and your lines. Now, once you have them all shaded in, you're going to divide them into chunks of 6/10 by using brackets at the bottom like this. And as you can see, 6/10 goes into 1 8/10 3 times. So our answer, our quotient, is 3. Please make sure you have all the work copied down and then glue this paper in your math notebook.